Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to your citizenship class over the 2008 civics test. So, this is the video for session 6, and by the time you watch this video, you should have watched all the previous videos up till now, up through session 5. If you haven't watched those yet, go back and watch them before you move on to this video. Okay, so this video, which I said was session 6, is going to talk about the 1900s history. This session deals with a lot of information that's happened over a 100-year time period. So from 1900 all the way up to 2001, okay? So it may seem like I'm just jumping all over the place, but trust me, this is all stuff you need to know, and I've tried to make it as less jumbled and as unconfusing as possible, okay? But before we jump into the 1900s, I want to do a quick review of some different people we've learned about, as names can sometimes be confusing. So you should have the paper in front of you that says review people questions for session 6, and I'm going to hold that up now so you can see maybe. Yep, so you can see review people questions session 6. And there's only 5 questions here, but that's what we're going to go over. So that's the sheet you should have in front of you right now. And so what we're going to do with that sheet is I'm going to read you the question, and then I want you to write in the name of that person, okay? So for the first review question, who is the governor of Iowa? So take some time and write in the name of that person now. Question 2 asks, who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Question 3, who signs a bill to make it a law? Question 4, name one of Iowa's senators. And finally, question 5, name your United States representative. All right, so the answer to these questions. So the answer to question number 1, who is the governor of Iowa? That is Kim Reynolds. Question 2, who wrote the Declaration of Independence? That is Thomas Jefferson. Question 3, who signs a bill to make it a law? That is the president. Question 4 wanted you to name one of Iowa's senators. So we have 2 that you can choose from. They are Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst. Either of them are correct. You just need to have one of them. And then finally, number 5 asked, who is your United States representative? And that is Marionette Miller Meeks. All right, so now that we have that people review out of the way, we're going to move on to talk about beginning the 1900s. So, at the beginning of the 1900s, you may remember in 1790, we talked about this picture in the last session. There were only 14 states and a population of about 3 million people. So, yep, 14 states, that was our population. By the time the 1900s came along, though, and this is a new map, so everything pink is a state and the yellow is a territory. By the time 1900 came along, we had 45 states, and our population had increased to 76,212,189 people. So, in just over 100 years, the population and our land size has grown quite significantly. And then, an additional fun fact as well, uh, there were at this time only 8,000 cars in the whole country, and none of them were west of the Mississippi River. So the Mississippi River, you remember, is right here where my red little dot is tracing. All of the cars that we had at this time were on this side of the country. We had none over here. And we now have a lot more than 8,000 cars in the country currently. We have a lot more. So that's just a fun fact to keep in mind to just see how much that we've grown. Okay. So the first milestone of the 1900s was World War I. And as the name implies, this was a war that was fought all over the world between many different countries. World War I, or the Great War as it is sometimes called, began in Europe in 1914. And the United States initially stayed out of the war for many years, letting the European countries deal with it among themselves. The United States joined the war in 1917 when an American ship was attacked by Germany. The United States joined the Allies, which included England, France, Russia, and Russia. And so the United States joined these three guys, and we are the good guys. We're fighting the bad guys. And so they fought the Central Powers. And the Central Powers were Germany, Austria Hungary, and Turkey. And so here you can see this pink stuff on this picture. This is all the Central Powers. Okay. And this gold, everything in this gold, these are the allies. This is who's fighting the pink. And the United States is part of this gold as well. World War I ended in 1918, so just 1 year after the United States joined, okay? During this time, Woodrow Wilson served as the president, and he served from 1913 to 1921, and he led the United States during World War I. So we can now answer question number 1, which asks who was the president during World War I? Go ahead and answer that question now. The next important thing that happened in the 1900s was women got the right to vote. So in 1920, the 19th Amendment was passed, and this amendment guaranteed a citizen's right to vote regardless of their gender. So up until now, women could not vote. And so the amendment changed that. The campaign for women to have the right to vote began way back in the 1800s before even the Civil War started. And that effort was known as the women's suffrage movement. In 1851, Susan B. Anthony, who's this lady right up here, Susan B. Anthony joined the movement, the women's suffrage movement, and she fought for women's rights. In 1869, she founded the National Woman Suffrage Association, the NWSA. Anthony died in 1906, and she is recognized because she helped women get the right to vote. So while Susan B. Anthony died in 1906 and women did not get the right to vote until 1920, Susan B. Anthony still did a lot of work to get women that right to vote, which is why she is so important and is still remembered up until this day. And a fun fact, actually, Susan B. Anthony actually spoke in Columbus Junction, Iowa, where we are now, in February of 1876. So what she would do is she would go on like tours of the United States, and she would talk about why she thought women deserved the right to vote. And one of those stops that she made was right here in Columbus Junction. All right, so we can now answer question number 2. And question number 2 asks, what did Susan B. Anthony do? And so these are the 2 possible answers. You just need to know one of them. So you can go ahead and write in that answer now. All right, so next up is the Great Depression and the New Deal. So in the 1930s, the United States had many economic problems. This period is known as the Great Depression. Businesses and banks closed, and people lost their homes, their jobs, and their entire savings that they had in the bank. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, also known as FDR, was elected president in 1932. He had a plan for rebuilding the country called the New Deal. The plan put people to work building public projects. It also established the minimum wage, Social Security, and many other welfare programs that are still in use today. And so this is FDR right over here. And you can see this was his campaign button that he ran on. So it's a picture of him. And then you see that he's running for a new deal. Okay. And so FDR was president from 1933 to 1945. FDR led the country during both the Great Depression and World War II. And World War II we will be talking about next. So we can now answer question number 3, which asks who was president during the Great Depression and World War II. Go ahead and answer the question now. All right, so we already talked about World War I, and the 1 on the end of it applies that it is not the only World War. And that's correct. There have been 2 world wars, both fought in the 1900s. World War II began in 1939. The United States joined in 1941 after the bombing of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. Pearl Harbor was a naval base in Hawaii. The two sides in this war were the Allies, and the Allies consisted of the United States, England, France, and Russia. And then the other side was the Axis powers, and the Axis powers consisted of Germany, Italy, and Japan. Now, those were the main countries on either side of the Axis and the Allies, but there were 23 other countries throughout the world that supported either the Allies or the Axis powers. And so here you can see everything that is red is all occupied by the Axis powers. And so here, I don't know if you can really see me because I'm a red thing, is Germany. And here's Italy. All of this was what Germany took over. And everything that's in the blue, that's all the Allies trying to fight back. Okay? The United States Army was led in World War II by General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was later then elected president. So this is Dwight Eisenhower right here. He was one of the main generals in World War II, and then he later went on to become one of our presidents. In 1943, Italy surrendered to the Allies. Okay, so Italy, which was one of the Axis powers, surrendered in 1943. World War II, however, did not officially end until 1945, and that happened after Germany surrendered in May, and then Japan surrendered in August of 1945. And so we can now answer questions number 4 and 5. Question 4 asks, who did the United States fight in World War II? And so this is the answer right there. You do need to know all 3 of these countries, Germany, Italy, and Japan. And then question 5 asks, what war was President Eisenhower in? So go ahead and answer those 2 questions now. The next important milestone in the 1900s was the Civil Rights Movement, which was in the 1950s and the 60s. Since the time of slavery, African Americans have fought for civil rights and equal treatment. So you may remember that after the ending of the Civil War, the 13th Amendment said all slaves are free, there is no slavery, and that all men have the right to vote in the 15th Amendment. And while that may have been the case, a lot of people still did not like that there were these African Americans here. And so they still did not have all the equal rights that the white people did. And so that's what the civil rights movement was. And so the civil rights movement tried to end racial discrimination. And one of the civil rights movement leaders was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so here you can see, this is a common picture from the civil rights movement era. You see black and white men and women holding hands, marching down the street, demanding that we have equal voting rights, that we were no longer separated in our public schools, and that we just had the same decent basic human rights that everyone else had. And so here we have another one as well. That marching was one of the most popular ways that they found they could get their message across was marching. And so question number 6 can now be answered. It asks, what movement tried to end racial discrimination? So you can go ahead and answer that question now. So as I said, Martin Luther King Jr. was the leader of the civil rights movement. He fought for equal rights and freedom for all Americans. This is a picture of Dr. King here, and this is during his famous I Have a Dream speech. In his famous I Have a Dream speech, Dr. King said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the content of their skin, but by the content of their character." Dr. King was assassinated in 1968. His birthday is a national holiday, and it is celebrated on the 3rd Monday in January every year. So question number 7 asks what Martin Luther King Jr. did. Go ahead and write in that answer now. So in the last session, we talked about the wars of the 1800s, and so we talked about these 4 over here. But in the 1900s, we participated in some wars as well. Now, we've already talked about World War I and World War II, but the United States also participated in the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Gulf War, all during the 1900s. And so question 8 asks for you to name one war that the United States was part of in the 1900s. Any of these 5 answers here that are circled are correct. You just need to know one. Write the one that is the easiest for you to remember. So, as I mentioned earlier in the video about how women got the right to vote through the 19th Amendment, and that actually is only one of 4 amendments to the Constitution that deal with voting. And so let's talk a little bit about those 4 now. And so the 15th Amendment, we already talked about, that was passed in 1870. It said that the right to vote cannot be denied based on race, color, or servitude. And so this gave former slaves the right to vote, and it said that men of all races could vote. The 19th Amendment was passed in 1920. It said that the right to vote cannot be denied based on sex. It was this amendment that gave women the right to vote. The 24th Amendment was passed in 1964, my apologies. And so what this amendment says is that the right to vote cannot be denied by failure to pay a poll tax. Some states were trying to make people pay in order to vote. And this amendment said that, that cannot happen. You don't need to pay to vote. Voting is completely free and it's a right that we all have. And then finally, the 26th Amendment was passed in 1971, and it set the age for the right to vote at 18. So this means that as soon as you are 18 years old and you are a citizen, you can vote in any election in the United States. So, question 9 wants you to name and describe one of the amendments that talks about voting. Any of the four that we just talked about are correct answers. You just need to pick one of them, and whichever is the easiest for you. So either the 15th and all men could vote, the 19th and women could vote, 24th and you don't have to pay a poll tax, or 26th and right to vote is at 18. Whichever is the easiest for you to remember. So go ahead and write that in now. So, one war that we haven't already talked about, because there was actually no fighting during that war, is the Cold War. And so the United States and Russia were allies during World War II. And after World War II ended, they became competing superpowers. So here you have the United States flag, and this is the flag of the Soviet Union, of which Russia was the main country. Okay? Russia was the leader of the Soviet Union, as I just said, or the USSR. The Soviets wanted to spread communism to Eastern Europe and the rest of the world. And the United States wanted to stop the spread of communism. So that was the main conflict in the war, okay? The Cold War was a war of words and military power, but had no actual fighting. In 1970, both nations began building up their nuclear weapons for protection against one another. In 1991, however, the Soviet Union fell apart, the Berlin Wall was destroyed, and the Cold War was officially over. So this war lasted about 50 years, even though there was no actual fighting. So, question 10 asks, what was the main concern of the United States during the Cold War? And so you can go ahead and write that answer in now. All right, and finally, this last event did not happen in the 1900s, but happened so soon after the century ended that it is included here in this video, anyways. And so, on September 11th, 2001, which is commonly called 9/11, terrorists attacked the United States. Terrorists took control of 4 U.S. airplanes to use for suicide attacks. 2 planes hit the World Trade Center in New York City. 1 plane crashed to the west wing of the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The 4th plane did not make it to the intended target, as passengers heroically crashed the plane into a field in Pennsylvania. Now, this 4th plane was headed for the White House, but the passengers, again, like I said, they heroically took down the hijackers and they crashed the plane in order to not crash into the White House. And so, as a result of 9/11, a total of 2,996 people were killed in the 9/11 attacks. And so here we have a picture of the World Trade Center. You can see here this tower in the back where all the smoke is billowing from. This was the first tower that was hit by one of the planes. And this image actually, however, captures right when the plane went into the second tower, which you can see in the explosion. And so this is a day that haunts many people still. I was only 1 year old when this event happened, but I know people that it has affected, and it changed the course of American history. So that was 9/11. And so question number 11 asks, what happened on September 11th, 2001? Go ahead and write in the answer to that question now. Okay, so that's all the material. So now we need to go through the worksheet and check to make sure that your answers and my answers are the same. So question number 1 asked, who was the president during World War I? That was Woodrow Wilson. Question 2 asked, what did Susan B. Anthony do? She fought for women's rights and helped women get the right to vote. You only need one of these answers, okay? Question 3 asked, who was the president during the Great Depression and World War II? That was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or you can say FDR. Question 4 asked, who did the United States fight in World War II? And that was the Axis powers, and they were Germany, Italy, and Japan. Question 5 asked, before he was president, Eisenhower was a general. What war was he in? He was in World War II. Question 7 asks, what did Martin Luther Question 6 asks, what movement tried to end racial discrimination? And that was the Civil Rights Movement. Question 7 asked, what did Martin Luther King Jr. do? He fought for equal rights. Question 8 asks for one war fought by the United States in the 1900s. And we talked about World War I, II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Gulf War. You just need to know one of them. Question 9 said that there are 4 amendments to the Constitution about who can vote. Describe one of them. So here you got the 15th that said all men could vote, the 19th where women could vote, 24th said you don't have to pay a poll tax, and the 26th you can vote at the age of 18. All of these are correct. You just need to know one of them. Question 10 asked, what was the main concern of the United States during the Cold War? And that was stopping the spread of communism. And finally, question 11, what major event happened on September 11th, 2001 in the United States? And that was terrorists attacked the United States. So make sure that your answers match what I have, because these are questions that you may be asked during your citizenship interview, and you want to make sure that you're studying the proper things. All right, so what happens after the worksheet review? You should know this by now. It's the dictation practice. So make sure you have the paper in front of you that says Session 6 Dictation Practice. So I'll read a sentence, and then I want you to write what I say. Same thing as always, okay? So let's start with sentence number 1. Any citizen can vote once they are 18 years old. Go ahead and write the sentence. Any citizen can vote once they are 18 years old. And so here is that sentence. So any citizen can vote once they are 18 years old. You can either write out the word 18 or write the number 18. I believe the number is easier. Okay? Sentence 2. The attack on the World Trade Center happened on September 11th, 2001. The attack on the World Trade Center happened on September 11th, 2001. And so here's that sentence. The attack on the World Trade Center, all capitalized, happened on September 11, 2001. And sentence 3. Communism was the main concern of the Cold War. Communism was the main concern of the Cold War. And so here's that sentence. So communism was the main concern of the Cold War, and Cold War is capitalized, okay? So remember, dictation is a crucial part of the citizenship interview, and you will need to be able to write a sentence that you hear the interviewer say. If you can successfully do that, then you will pass the writing portion of the interview with ease, okay? So make sure you practice this dictation. And if you mess up, go back to the other videos. Go back through this video. Don't just give up, okay? So I'm going to turn on my camera again. So between now and the review video for the last 2 sessions, I want you guys to complete the homework that you've been provided. Excuse me. The writing practice this time, once again, contains 8 sentences. So I want you guys to practice writing out those 8 sentences, and then I want you to practice reading them out loud. This will help you prepare for when you must read and write sentences in your citizenship interview. There is also a reading assignment that I want you guys to complete. Practice reading World War II between now and the next video. Make sure you practice reading this out loud, guys. Take it slow and break it up into smaller sections if you need to. I believe in you, and don't let yourself get in your own head, okay? You can do it. All right, so that's the end of session 6. The next video will be the review video for session 5 and 6. But the next session, session 7, is the final session in this video series, okay? And that will be over citizenship rights and responsibilities, and then the citizenship application and interview. So you can see that now. So citizenship rights and responsibilities, and the application and interview, okay? And always, if you have any questions at all, please call the Columbus Junction Public Library at 319 728 7972. Or if you would prefer to email, you can email Mandy Grimm, the library director, at this email address down below. Or if you would prefer to come in person and talk to us, you are more than welcome to do that. You can come in anytime when the library is open, and we will happily assist you in any questions you might have. Well, all right, guys, that's all I have for session 6. So I'll see you guys soon in the review video for sessions 5 and 6. Happy homeworking and see you soon. Bye, everyone.